This is Storytellers and Storysellers live on tape. You're listening to Vineet Kanabar on the IVM Podcast Network. On each episode of this show, we talk to people from the business of entertainment. Whether you're on the creative side or on the business side, I get my guests to talk to us about their journeys, their learnings, their wisdoms, their truths about working in this fantastic business of storytelling. On today's episode, we're talking to Aakash Kaushik. Aakash is best known for having, I think, the best year of all writers in 2022. He's had Bhool Bhulaiyaa 2 come out. Bhool Bhulaiyya 2 is among the top 10 grossing films this year in the Hindi film industry. And he's had the very impactful Thank God come out. Thank God being comedy, philosophy, emotion, a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for the.
Thank you for joining us. Man.
Yeah, pleasure.
Great to have you here. My intention is to talk to Aakash today about the role of a writer in creating great entertainment, great movies specifically. I want to know about his journey, about how he got to writing, about how he made it all the way to the big screen. We're also going to talk about what it takes to be a writer in this day and age, right? The writer is the genesis of creativity. That's is the first guy in the entire process often where ideas start from, but the writer has to bring in so many different people into the realization of that idea. So writers necessarily collaborative. And I'm going to I'm going to ask Aakash how he goes about doing that. And we'll talk about a bunch of other sundry things. It's always fun to have writers on the show. Aakash Kaushik in the studio with us today. Aakash, describe how your year has been. 2 fantastic films, top-notch reviews. People are loving what you're putting out. How are you feeling?
Well, it's quite overwhelming. It's sometimes hard to believe because I've been here for a long time and I've craved for this success. And it finally came when it was not coming for anybody.
Right.
Because you can have success. I mean, a lot of people have successes, but luckily I had a success when none of the other films were working. So it tastes even sweeter. So, yeah, I mean, God is kind and I'm very happy with how it has gone.
And we are very happy for you. You said something very interesting there, that nothing else is working. Why is nothing else working?
I think there are multiple reasons for that. Firstly, like during COVID, most of the films that were coming were made before pandemic hit, right? And during this time, when people were home for 2 years, they were watching world cinema, they were watching OTT. And what happened was that they were exposed to cinema and stuff that they had not seen earlier. So their taste really changed. Whereas what we had made was according to taste, which was earlier.
Sure.
So that was one of the reasons. Another reason is, and one of the major reasons actually, is the habit of going to cinema. वो छूट गई लोगों की.
Right.
Earlier people they had this habit कि अच्छा कुछ नहीं आया, let's go and watch a film. But that's what happened, that you can't go out. So you got used to it. So that habit of going left, and so I think that was one other reason. And thirdly, I think we are also somewhere also to be blamed, as in the producers and all, because somewhere they got into this project making business where अच्छा ये hero है, ये cast है, we can sell it for this much. So the reason to make the film was not creative but to earn money.
Right.
So I think somewhere the blame goes there as well. So yeah, top of my head, I think these 3 reasons come to my mind.
This is exactly why I love talking to writers on the show. They've thought about things, right? Writers, you only become a great writer if you've really thought about something. And when you've thought about something, you don't have to make up words while a question is asked, right? You know the answer. So in like a minute flat, Aakash has told you why films were not working in the post-COVID era. Love it, man.
Thank you. I've never felt this intelligent earlier.
That's why you should be on these podcasts, right? You should just be here. Let me ask you this. You said about this year taking on a project like Bhool Bhulaiyaa 2. Now, Bhool Bhulaiyaa 1 came out when I was much younger. I didn't have so much white hair in my beard, neither in my hair. Was it daunting to take that up? I know the way it came about wasn't that it wasn't intended to be a sequel of Bhool Bhulaiyaa 2, right? You'd written a story and you'd pitched it, and then it seemed like, oh, hey, this really looks like Bhool Bhulaiyaa. But when that moment happened, when it went from, hey, this is just a story that I have written and I'm pitching, to, oh, wow, this is getting attached to a massive project. How did that make you feel?
Well, absolutely, it was daunting, and but the thing is that it made me work. It gave me a reason to work harder because it's a Bhool Bhulaiyaa one is a cult.
Absolutely.
So when you're making a sequel to that, you have to, shoulder the responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very well aware of that, and I had a lot of nervous nights, and there would be times when I'm sleeping and suddenly I'll get up and I'll go to the other room, I'll open my laptop, and I'll start writing.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think that responsibility, that added responsibility, made me work harder to write a script where we were confident of what we are doing. What happens a lot of times that in my earlier films, sometimes I was not happy with the product.
Right.
So how can I expect the audience to be happy? So this time, I think for the first time with Bhool Bhulaiyaa 2, I told all my friends and family that now whether this receives love or criticism, I'll accept it with open arms because this is what I intended to make, this is what we thought to make, and this is what we have made. So yeah.
Love it. Talk us through this process, right? And like I said at the top of the episode, a writer's job is not just putting words on a page and then forgetting about it, right? Like, you're involved in so many different facets of realizing the film. You're working with the producer, you're then working with the director. I'm sure you have inputs on set, I'm sure you have inputs on dialogue delivery, I'm sure you have inputs on casting. There's so much that goes into it, right? So, two-part question. Number one, how do you think a writer should approach collaborating like this? And if you can take us through this with some examples of your experience on BB2. And my second part question, which we will come back to, is why don't the writers get enough of their due? Because again, it's not just words on a page, it's creative labor that goes so far. But we'll come back to this question. First of all, writers collaborating, bringing people in, what's your process like? Give us a few examples.
So see, like when we started, you also said that writer is the first person in the crew. It starts from him, and if you come to think of it, even the worst films, even the most disastrous films, the scripts were liked, which is why those films were made.
Right.
So at least there was some merit in that script.
Right.
So somewhere there is.
Wait. We'll do this again. Do this again because this is important, right? Just गौर फरमाइएगा, आकाश ने जो बात कही है यहाँ पे बहुत गहरी है कि खराब से खराब भी जो फिल्म हो वो किसी ने डिसाइड की बनानी है क्योंकि स्क्रिप्ट उन्हें अच्छी लगी.
बिल्कुल.
तो गलती राइटर की नहीं है. ये हम पहले ही बता देना चाहते हैं. द राइटर इज नॉट एट फॉल्ट. जोक्स अपार्ट, प्लीज बैक टू यू.
हाँ, नहीं, राइटर की भी गलतियाँ होती है, ऐसी बात नहीं है, ऑफ कोर्स होती हैं. बट सी, फिल्म मेकिंग इज द मोस्ट एक्सपेंसिव फॉर्म ऑफ आर्ट.
राइट.
So you have to be well aware that आप एक film लिख रहे हैं. You're not writing a literary work or just a book. So as a writer, you also have to be aware from the producer's perspective. He's putting in the money in the film and all that. But having said that, the others are not thinking from your perspective.
Right.
So you have to ensure that what you have written is actually the same, at least your perspective is followed as they're putting the film together.
Right.
Like I always give an analogy that this happened with me in the initial years of my career. Ki writing a script is like giving birth to a child.
Right.
And then you give the child to somebody else to raise it. And you can see that they're not doing a good job with your child. And when that, after the upbringing, when the child makes a mistake, people say, "Kaisa bacha paida kiya tumne?" So it's very important for a writer to be there while the upbringing of the script or the child is taking place, and ensure that the way you intended it to be, it is the same way. So
Right.
I think that's one of the most important things, and it's most challenging as well, because you are not the final boss. The director, the producer, they have the final say. So you have to keep, and you have to understand that they're putting in the money. It's not and I always say that it's not we against them. We are the same team.
Right.
If they're putting in the money, they also want to make a good film. So you have to understand that, okay, whatever, that their commercials are in place and all that. But at the same time, you have to ensure that the creativity is not hampered in the way.
But let me ask you this in context of BB2, because I think it's a wonderful case study in the exact question that I have for you, which is, you wrote something, right? It had nothing to do with the film franchise. Then an opportunity arose that the film was looking to be to get a sequel. You had a script that was apt. What was the process of collaboration there? in bringing the franchise into the script or bringing the script into the franchise, whichever way that migration works? How was that process like?
See, honestly, it was a little uncanny how the script that I was writing was so close to. I mean, I had not put it, I had not written it like Bhool Bhulaiyaa, but how good a Bhool Bhulaiyaa it could have been,
Right.
because it had a twist in the end and stuff like that. So there was some divine, I would say, some divine intervention or some
Sure.
divine play over there. But having said that, yeah, it was quite a process of. And I would have to give the credit to the director, Anees Basmi, because he was a writer himself.
Right.
So he understands the importance of the writer and his perspective. So he gave me a lot of freedom. And I think it's very difficult to draw a line कि कब film franchise में बन गई या franchise से कहानी बन गई. It's very difficult to draw the line. But बनते बनते बन गई.
बहुत ही बढ़िया. और जब ये process हो रहा था, there are other aspects also, right? How involved, in your opinion, and from your experience versus maybe other films or what you've seen around in your 14 years in the industry, how involved were you? How involved were you in the other processes, and how involved is a writer on average?
So I want to be involved as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, my director was gracious enough to involve me in every aspect. So I was there on the editing as well as the mixing of the film.
Oh, wow.
So in fact, Bhool Bhulaiyaa took 3 years of my life,
Right.
because first it was spread over because of COVID and all. So, but whenever I went back to that film, I wanted to give my 100%. I was there like I said, during the edit. I did not miss even a single day of the shoot. So yeah, you have to be involved. Generally, directors are they want the writers to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the directors are like, "नहीं, अभी तुम्हारा काम हो गया, जाने दो." But I was lucky enough to be there on the sets of the film throughout.
Love it, man. And I think, like you said, it took 3 years of your life, and that's the kind of input that something that goes on to become that big of a success needs. Right?
And one more thing I would like to add, that while writing Bhool Bhulaiyaa 2 also, it's not only the pressure was throughout, you know, are we making a good sequel? Also, we did not have Akshay Kumar,
Right.
who was like, it was his franchise, but the story demanded a younger actor.
Right.
So somewhere, you know, from outside also, अरे ये कैसे फिल्म बना सकते हो अक्षय कुमार के बिना, और but कहानी की ऐसी मांग थी.
Right.
So that was again a big pressure that I had. Also, one thing I got a lot of flack for initially before the film released. This is even during the making as well as after when the trailer and all came, that everybody was like, कि, अरे part 1 was a psychological thriller. You've made a ghost film.
Right.
So why have you done that? So I mean, it's difficult to make them understand that the USP of the first one was that there's no ghost.
Right.
It's already done. If I make the same thing, then what is the new thing that I'm offering? The audience is already anticipating that there won't be any ghost. So Bhool Bhulaiyaa 2 had to be a ghost film. But that's the thing with the franchise. There are so many people asking questions and all that. And then you have to believe in what you're making. So you have to have that kind of confidence that you can stand up in front of the producer, the director, the actors, and the world outside, that no, this is what we are making, this is what we believe in. And so yeah, that was another important aspect of while writing and
No, absolutely. I think that's what I wanted to get out when I said, how did the story go into the franchise and franchise go into the story, right? Because एक तो thriller, ghost, mystery, space में, right? Often you get sequels which are either a +1 on the first film or a different setting, a different premise, different actors, right? Like, for example, you take Knives Out.
Correct.
Fantastic film. But again, I think part 2 is going to be very similar in treatment to part 1, right? But BB1 with BB2, very different space. Sure, characters looked similar. I mean, I think if you take the poster of BB1 and BB2, I think it's pretty intentional, possibly, that Karthik and Akshay Kumar are in similar get-ups. I think throughout those motifs are played up as well, but they're fundamentally different films, right? They're still, I think one you would call a psycho-thriller comedy, the other you would call a horror comedy. It's different treatment in
correct,
in as much as you can be a film geek about it and say different treatment, right? But yeah, I think what you said about the writer's conviction being very important, especially in this day and age where franchises are so much bigger sometimes than the film itself, right? I think it's very important what you said, that the conviction of the writer when taking your material to the producer, the director, the audience, I think that's where it really stems from,
So
right?
I'll give you a good example, example better than Knives Out, and it's from our own Hindi film industry. That's
Sure.
Munna Bhai.
Absolutely.
Munna Bhai, MBBS, and Lagero Munna Bhai. The two characters are the same, but the
Right.
stories are absolutely different.
Absolutely.
So I always used to give the example of that. Ki trust in what we are doing. We have kept the same elements though. There is that Band Darwaza. There is that Bhairo Kavach, Suraksha Kavach, jo khulega to bhoot bahar aa jayega.
Right.
There is of course there is Manjulika, and of course there is Ami Je Tumar. So those elements we were very well aware that we can't, even if you're making a new film, those elements need to be there. Otherwise, audience will feel cheated. So yeah, to strike the right balance between offering something new at the same time having the essence of the old one, that was also a tricky part, and somewhere I think we were successful in doing that.
Love it. I remember being at the T Series office to get a early preview of the soundtrack. And I think that same principle held there as well, right? They kept the two songs
Yeah.
that were, that was a callback to the success. But the rest of the soundtrack was fresh, it was different.
In fact, another thing that probably people have not noticed, in climax when Ami Je Tumar comes, it is actually a blend of both the songs.
Right.
It also has the melody of Teri Aankhein Bhool Bhulaiyaa and Ami Je Tumar.
Absolutely.
So people didn't notice that, but even there we used both the songs. Teri Aankhein Bhool Bhulaiyaa का melody पूरा उस गाने में हमने use किया है.
Love it. And shout out to Shreya Ghoshal.
Oh, absolutely.
What a voice. We'll take a quick break.
Sure.
And on the other side, talk more about your journey as a writer and how
Sure.
writers can get their due more
Absolutely.
in the Indian film industry. Go nowhere. Fascinating conversation with Aakash Kaushik. We're back right after these messages.
Hi, hello everyone. It's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Aakash and Noel discuss a Kerala movie theatre creating soundproof crying room for parents with babies. On the Filter Coffee Podcast, Karthik talks to Ajay Pratap Singh, CEO of Sports Kida. They talk about sports writing and the emotional connect sports have in India. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to Shruti Jain, Chief Strategic Officer and Sustainable Influencer at Arihant Capital. They talk about socially responsible investing or SRI and the history of smart and sustainable investing. On the Advertiser's Guide to the Galaxy, Karthik Srinivasan explores the unethical LinkedIn tactic in Monster's rebranding announcement. And on Explain Like I'm 10, Meghnad welcomes Ashish Singhal, founder and CEO of CoinSwitch, and Urjita Vani, stand-up comedian and writer, to discuss whether cryptocurrencies are here to stay. Once again, don't forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcasts.com. We have some exciting stuff for you. Follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, spread the word. Tell your friends and don't forget to rate and review them wherever you're listening to them. You'll also find all our shows on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week, Kotak Privy League Program and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you for making this possible.
And we're back. We're still talking to Aakash Kaushik. A couple of days ago, and we're recording this in early December, a couple of days ago I read an interview of yours that came out and you said something very interesting, which was a lot of writers become directors because writers don't get their due in, I'm not going to say Bollywood, in the Indian film industry, right? First of all, why? In your experience, why don't writers get their due?
Well, that's the question I've been looking into the answer for the longest. But that's the way it has been from the beginning.
Right.
I mean, see, there's an old saying, content is king.
Mhm.
But if that's truth, then we are the kingmakers.
Right.
We create content.
Absolutely.
But for some rhyme or reason, the writer has never gotten the recognition or the credit that he deserves. And it's a sad fact. Things are gradually changing, but still there's a long, long way to go. In fact, even, see, everybody's work is very important, but still a DOP also gets more respect than a writer.
Mhm.
So I don't know what's the reason behind it, but I think gradually things are changing, and hopefully in the future they will change even more.
Let me ask you this. In your idealized world where a writer gets the due credit, what does that look like?
Um, oh, that's a good question. I've never thought of it that way. I've always wanted that to happen. I don't know how that's gonna look. But wow, I really need to think about that. Probably when we take next break and then we come back to we can come back to this question.
We'll give you some time on that one.
Yeah.
What is your saddest moment in your writing career? Right, I know it's an off question to ask you, but it's on theme, right? Writing is a labor when you really think about it. What has been your toughest moment in that sense?
See, when you get used to people taking advantage of you, that happens. I think that happens in every field. But few things just hit you really hard and stay with you. So I remember there was one time that I'm from Delhi.
Right.
I'd gone back to my hometown, and I was really struggling those days, and just ek aad kaam yahan kara wo kara. And it was around March, so my dad was filing his papers ki income tax ke, and so जो हमारे घर का सर्वेंट था उसका बैलेंस शीट सामने पड़ा हुआ था, and I realized that he had made more money than me that year.
Oh man.
So that really hit me hard. And I didn't say anything. I just went inside my room and I just wept and wept and wept. Then there were times when there was a producer. I said, yeah, let's meet up. कुछ करना है, ये करते हैं. And then he said, अरे मेरी बेटी की शादी है, उसकी स्क्रिप्ट लिख दो ज़रा, जो डांस वांस से पहले है. So so these things do happen, and they are still with me. But अब बहुत अच्छा लगता है जब वही प्रोड्यूसर बार बार फ़ोन करके बुलाते हैं, अरे तू तो मेरा बेटा है, अरे आई हैव तो नोन यू फॉर द लॉन्गेस्ट टाइम. So you learn to laugh on it and live with it. But yeah, when it happens, it really, really breaks you.
Man.
And I look at it through the funny side. I mean, this is one of the funniest things that happened. There was this producer, I won't name him. वो उन्होंने अपनी एंजियोप्लास्टी कराई थी या कुछ तो कराया था, तो वो अपनी रिपोर्ट वहाँ रखते थे. तो मैं जब भी पैसे मांगने जाता था, बेटा देख ब्लॉकेज देख, बेटा 60% ब्लॉकेज है देख. सो मैं बस हंसता हूँ और उनको सोचता हूँ कि ठीक है, इसको यूज़ करके किसी कैरेक्टर के साथ डाल दूंगा आगे. बिकॉज
डेंजर होता है राइटर्स, है ना?
बिल्कुल होता है. आपको पता नहीं, मैं यहाँ बैठे बैठे भी आपका कैरेक्टर किसी फिल्म में डालने वाला.
मैं तो रुका हूँ सर, चांस तो दो सर.
कैरेक्टर, एक्टर नहीं.
I'm joking. But thank you for sharing, man. It was very nice of you to share, and very tough. But I'm so glad that, like you said, अब वो प्रोड्यूसर फोन करके कहता है कि यार
हाँ,
हम
करेक्ट.
तो पुराने हैं,
हाँ, करेक्ट.
शागिर्द. Let me ask you this, and I'd love to know in as much detail or in as much that you can share your writing process and your writing wisdom. But how do you approach writing something that will be a film? And let me qualify this question a little bit, right? अब जैसे OTT की दुनिया में कैसा है, हर फिल्म की, हर शो की या शॉर्ट फिल्म की या व्हाटएवर एक ऑडियंस होती है. फिल्म की ऑडियंस सब लोग होते हैं बाय एंड लार्ज, राइट? अगर कोई RRR लिख रहा है तो वो लिखी जा रही है 5 करोड़, 8 करोड़, 10 करोड़ लोगों के लिए शायद. भूल भुलैया मेरे हिसाब से anywhere between 3 to 8 crore, 3 to 7 crore people might have seen it. It is an insane number to think about, right? मतलब मुझे आप कहोगे कहानी बताने अब 100 लोग, 1000 लोग, लाख लोग, पर 5 करोड़ लोगों के लिए कहानी लिखना कोई शुरू करे तो कहाँ से करे? और ये आपका प्रोसेस इसमें क्या है?
मैं ये इस पर्सपेक्टिव से देखता ही नहीं हूँ. मैं सिर्फ ये देखता हूँ क्या अच्छा है और क्या बुरा है, क्या मुझे इंटरेस्टिंग लगता है या नहीं लगता. मतलब अगर आप मिस्टर बीन को देखें, हालांकि वो बहुत स्लैपस्टिक स्पेस में है, बट ही तो डजंट इवन नीड अ लैंग्वेज,
राइट?
उनकी तो पूरा ग्लोबल ऑडियंस है. तो मेरे ड्राइवर से लेकर कोई यूके में बैठा कोई बिजनेसमैन भी उसको एंजॉय करता है. हाँ, प्रिंस चार्ल्स भी उसको एंजॉय करता है. सो
किंग चार्ल्स,
या एग्जैक्टली, किंग चार्ल्स नाउ. तो मैं उसको उस पर्सपेक्टिव से नहीं देखता. मैं ये देखता हूँ कि यार ये आइडिया में कुछ नॉवेल्टी है, कुछ नयापन है और एक्साइटिंग है. मैं किसी स्पेसिफिक लोग के हिसाब से बनाने के लिए नहीं जाता. That's my modus operandi. That's how I work. I have to find the idea interesting.
Sure.
It has to be something that I've not seen yet. Because like I said, मैं तो फिल्म में एक बार घुसता हूँ तो मैं तो अपनी जब तक फिल्म बनती है एंड एडिट होती है रिलीज होती है तो इट टेक्स एटलीस्ट अ कपल ऑफ ईयर्स ऑफ योर लाइफ. सो आई ओनली डू समथिंग विच रियली एक्साइट्स मी एंड आई फाइंड दिस हैज नॉट बीन डन. And mind you, I have gotten into that position now, not earlier. Because पहले तो खाने के वांदे, मतलब खाने के वांदे तो नहीं थे, but by God's grace I come from a decent background, so my parents were very supportive. But एक अपने आप बनाने का होता है ना कि I want to do it on my own, I want to do it on my own.
Of course.
So initially you don't even have the luxury of choosing what you want to do.
Right.
But now, by God's grace, I'm in a position where I can choose what I want to do, and this is what I really think. So it's not about मैं किन के लिए बना रहा हूँ, ये मुझे एक्साइटिंग लग रहा है कि नहीं लग रहा है. और अगर मुझे एक्साइटिंग लग रहा है तो मेरा मानना है कि ये लोगों को एक्साइटिंग लगेगा क्योंकि ये कुछ नया है.
बट वो आपको वो टेस्ट कैसे करते हो? मतलब मेरे सवाल का मतलब ये कि जब आप खुद के लिए कुछ लिख रहे हो, खुद के लिए कुछ बना रहे हो, जैसे मैं जब ये शो शुरू कर रहा था तो मुझे लगता था मैं सिर्फ अपने लिए बना रहा हूँ, मुझे फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता कौन सुने. बट जैसे ऑडियंस बढ़ते जाती है तो आपको फिर ऑडियंस को भी माइंड में रखना पड़ता है. तो वो टेस्ट कैसे करते हो आपकी ये चलेगा, ये नहीं चलेगा, या ये पसंद आएगा, ये नहीं पसंद आएगा? वो दैट कोर आइडिया रिमेन्स, राइट? द कोर आइडिया रिमेन्स एक्साइटिंग, बट अ फिल्म इज सो मच मोर देन जस्ट अ कोर आइडिया, राइट? देयर इज यू नीड अ कैरेक्टर, वो कैरेक्टर क्विपी है, फनी है, इंटेंस है, इस टाइप की चीजें कैसे बिल्ड
So
होती है?
I think उसके दो एस्पेक्ट हैं.
Sure.
One is the art, the other is the craft.
Sure.
The art is that's your God gift. आपको एक creative flair है, आप लिखते हैं कुछ नया. The craft is what you learn over the period.
Sure.
कि यार ये इतना ये वर्क करेगा कि नहीं करेगा. So there is no set pattern to it. As you develop your writing skills and you move forward, आपको पता लग जाता है कि ये चीज़ वर्क कर रही है कि नहीं कर रही है. And honestly, लाइक आई सेड कि मुझे वो अगर अंदर से कन्विक्शन नहीं है, अगर वो कन्विक्शन आता है तो मैं तो डायरेक्टर्स और प्रोड्यूसर और एक्टर्स के सामने भी खड़ा आता हूँ, नहीं सर मेरे हिसाब से ये सही है. सो वो कहीं ना कहीं आपको पता लग जाता है. मैं कभी भी मैं उस पर्सपेक्टिव से नहीं बनाता फिल्म कि यार ये 5 करोड़ लोग को अच्छी लगनी चाहिए. मैं इस पर्सपेक्टिव से बनाता हूँ यार ऐसा कुछ आया नहीं है, ऐसा कुछ बनाऊंगा ना ये लोग को पसंद आएगा, ये इंटरेस्टिंग है, ये मुझे पसंद आ रहा है तो ये लोग, मैं भी तो ऑडियंस हूँ ना, आई एम ऑल्सो नॉट पार्ट ऑफ द ऑडियंस, आई ऑल्सो वॉच फिल्म्स, ये कुछ नयापन लगेगा. तो मैं उस तरीके से लिखता हूँ. अगर मेरा वो पर्सपेक्टिव ही नहीं है कि ये मैं टेलर मेड कर लूँ 5 करोड़ लोग के लिए, 10 करोड़ लोग के लिए, बिकॉज आई वॉन्ट टू राइट अ स्टोरी विच इज़ नॉवल, विच इज़ इंटरेस्टिंग and which I find exciting, and I believe if I find it exciting then the world will also find it exciting.
It's fantastic, man. I have two parallel questions coming into my mind. First is, जब आप ये लिख रहे होते हो, right? स्टोरी में गाना कैसे घुसाते हैं?
अब ये टाइम चेंज हो गया लकीली. पहले ये होता था कि फर्स्ट हाफ में 3 गाने, सेकंड हाफ में 3 गाने, ये होता था. अब वो टाइम चेंज हो गया. अब लोग बोलते नहीं यार तुम कहानी लिखो, गाने, मतलब एक्टर्स हैव कम टू मी, ये गाने ज़्यादा तो नहीं हो रहे ना, क्योंकि लेटली अभी ये चेंज आया है. बट लाइक आई सेड दैट्स आल्सो क्राफ्ट. आप समझ जाते हो एंड यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड द प्रोड्यूसर्स पर्सपेक्टिव आल्सो, बट यू हैव टू मेक श्योर कि यार ये टिपिकल तरीके से ना है. आपको अगर एक गाना डालना है तो आप एक टिपिकल तरीके से मत डालिए, आप उसको किसी नए तरीके से डालिए, एक नए सिचुएशन में डाल दीजिए. जैसे कि सो लाइक आई वाज राइटिंग दिस फिल्म, उसके अंदर एक बहुत पेपी नंबर था, तो आई सेड कैन वी पुट इट ओवर अ चेस सीक्वेंस, राइट? सो देयर इज, आप जब उसे बाहर दिखाएंगे आप अलग म्यूजिक वीडियो शूट कीजिए, लेकिन मेरी फिल्म में वो पूरा गाना बैकग्राउंड स्कोर में, जहाँ गाड़ियाँ जा रही हैं, देयर इज एक्सप्लोजन एंड ऑल दैट, और वो पेपी नंबर चल रहा है. सो ज़रूरी नहीं है कि वो किसी क्लब में जाके ही बैठेगा और वो ड्रिंक हाथ में लेगा और सामने आके कोई गाना होगा. So you have to find new ways of doing it. और कई बार क्या होता है आप रियलाइज़ नहीं करते, लेकिन एक रिलीफ भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होता है फिल्म में. कहीं ना कहीं हम लोग के अंदर फॉर सम रीज़न दिस चेंज हैज़ कम दैट, so I remember I had gone to Egypt and the people I met there, and they were really complaining कि what happened to you guys, what happened to the Bollywood films, इट वाज सो ग्रेट, उसमें गाने होते थे, कलर होता था, वी यूज्ड टू लुक फॉरवर्ड टू दैट. आपने अपनी आइडेंटिटी खो दी.
राइट.
सो समवेयर हमारे अंदर एक चीज़, एक तो वो पता नहीं हॉलीवुड से एक हमारा इंफीरियरिटी कॉम्प्लेक्स है क्या है कि नहीं हमें वैसी फिल्म बनानी है. सो यू हैव टू एक्सेप्ट दैट हिंदी फिल्म में गाने होते हैं.
राइट.
तो कई बार रिलीफ के लिए गाना चाहिए होता है.
बिल्कुल.
कई बार ये हो जाता है कि यार नहीं सर यहाँ पे गाना आना चाहिए. आई एम राइटिंग अ वेरी वन ऑफ द फिल्म्स दैट आई एम राइटिंग इज अ मर्डर मिस्ट्री.
राइट.
एंड उसके अंदर बीच में बहुत देयर इज सो मच डार्क स्टफ दैट इज हैपनिंग एंड सडनली ऐसा नहीं सर अभी वी नीड अ रिलैक्सिंग, वी नीड सम रिलीफ फॉर द ऑडियंस एंड ऑल दैट. सो यू हैव टू मेक सॉन्ग्स पार्ट ऑफ द स्टोरी टेलिंग.
राइट.
समटाइम्स विजुअली लाइक आई सेड, आपने चेस सीक्वेंस में डाला है किस तरीके से डाला, एंड समटाइम्स लाइक अ बेसिक जिस रोको इंजॉय करने दो लोग को.
राइट.
सो बिकॉज एट द एंड ऑफ द डे लोग इंजॉय करने गए हैं फिल्म,
बिल्कुल. बिल्कुल.
है ना. और गाने हमारी फिल्म्स का बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट रहे हैं.
है.
सो व्हाई डू वी शाय अवे फ्रॉम दैट? आई डोंट थिंक वी शुड.
I think we have also, as filmmakers in India, I think there has been a conscious shift away. There's also been the whole multiplex culture. लोगों के पास अब और 3 घंटे नहीं है, शायद 2 घंटे की फिल्म बनानी है. वो सारे भी इक्वेशंस आए हैं. जैसे one of the movements that I have seen away from picturizing songs. पहले अगर कैसेट में 12 गाने होते थे तो फिल्म में भी 12 गाने होते थे. अब ऐसा है कि अगर सीडी पे या एल्बम में 8 गाने हैं तो फिल्म में शायद 4 ही पिक्चराइज किए हैं, बाकी सिर्फ ओएसटी के लिए हैं या बीजीएम के लिए हैं, which is also an interesting move, definitely away from what was the identity of the big fat Indian film. But you're absolutely right. I think that's a very nuanced way of looking at giving the audience a bit of relief as well, right? Otherwise the film gets very, very intense. I want to dig a little bit deeper as we progress in this conversation about the writing in the Indian film industry, right? Now, from previous conversations on this show, whether we've talked about web series, whether we've talked about film, there have been different approaches to making a film or to writing for the screen, right? There is the whole पहले 1 pager लिखो, फिर उसका 3 pager बनाओ, फिर स्क्रिप्ट बढ़े. Then there is the new approach of a writer's room, right? What is your take on this? Have you also been, I'm sure in your time you've also received a 1 pager or a 2 pager or a 5 pager, or अरे डायलॉग बढ़ा दो इसमें. What is your take on these approaches that we have to writing?
So see, I've studied direction from Film Institute Pune,
Right.
so which is the most premier institute in our country, and वहाँ से पढ़ने के बाद मेरे को बहुत मोटी मोटी बुक्स थी जो राइटिंग के ऊपर थी, और मैंने वो पढ़ी और फिर मैं उनको भूल गया. बिकॉज आई फेल्ट आई नीड टू बी फ्लेक्सिबल. आई कांट फॉलो रूल्स जो एक सेट किताब में होते हैं. और अगर वो किताब में अगर है ही, अगर इतना आसान है तो फिर कोई भी राइटर बन जाता, कोई भी कर जाता. देयर इज नो सेट फॉर्मूला टू इट, राइट? I made my own way of working. I made my own way of writing. But guess what? Once I wrote that script and I realized I had actually followed all those rules, not looking for them. So everybody has their own pattern of working. I am not the sorts who believes. I believe in a bound script. I definitely think you need a bound script before you go for your shooting. But I don't believe in writing पहले एक 1 pager and 5 pager. In fact, few of my friends, actors who are friends, they say अभी no you. In fact, Film Institute के मेरे कुछ दोस्त हैं जो अब actors बन गए, ऐसे नहीं यार written script दे. I said यार it's a audio visual medium. I personally feel मैं कितना भी अच्छा पेपर पे लिख दूँ, for me to make you understand my perspective, मुझे सामने बैठ के सुनाने दो.
बिल्कुल.
तो मैं तो हमेशा ये करता हूँ दैट आपको 1 pager चाहिए, आपको 5 pager चाहिए, मैं सब दूंगा. बट दैट इज़ बिकॉज आपको वो चाहिए. आई डोंट वर्क दैट वे.
राइट.
मैं तो अपनी खुली स्क्रिप्ट ऐसे छोड़ देता हूँ, कोई पढ़ के बता भी नहीं सकता कि इट्स एंड आई थिंक इट वुड बी अ प्रॉब्ली page and a half, and it will be a 2-hour narration because I've just written one word and how I know how that goes. But that's I have a very erratic way of working. People are very systematic. It works for them.
Sure.
This thing works for me. I believe in narrations. I believe in sitting in front of the actor and narrating him the entire story. And so yeah, but these new techniques of I mean, writer's room is not a new technique. It's been there for a very long time, and people are doing great work there. But I am not one of those sorts who believes in that, or who does that rather. I believe in it, but I don't do that.
And why is that? Do you feel that the act of storytelling, as in a narration, is more organic, or does that allow you to treat the narration differently for who the audience is? Why do you think it works for you better this way?
So I'll tell you what. It's not. We are not writing a novel.
Right.
A novel is I'm leaving it to your own perspective. आप जब आप एक बुक पढ़ते हैं आपका क्यों होता है कि जब एक नॉवल के ऊपर मूवी बनती है तो लोग कहते हैं यार उतनी अच्छी नहीं थी जितनी अच्छी नॉवल थी बिकॉज यू हैड योर ओन परसेप्शन यू हैड विजुलाइज्ड इट योर ओन वे you would visualize it differently, I'll visualize it differently.
Absolutely.
But we are in an audio visual medium.
Right.
So it is very important when you're reading it, probably no matter how nicely I put it on paper, you may not be able to see it the way I am seeing it. So it's very important, which is why I say you take a narration, then you read the script. At least you're aware of how I have perceived it, how I have gone about it. So which is that's my only thing against it. I'm not against, like I said, you need a bound script before you go into shoot. Absolutely you do. But like, yeah, I think made my point clear that मेरा perspective आपको समझ आना चाहिए.
बिल्कुल. I understand that. According to you, and again, we'll go a little bit into how you pitch a script, right? But according to you, when do you consider a film script complete?
Well, it's a never-ending process. Till the time it's not shot. उसमें कुछ ना कुछ चेंजेस तो आते रहते हैं. इवन इफ यू हैव गॉट अ बाउंड स्क्रिप्ट, आप सेट पे जाते हैं, कई बार कुछ जैसा आपने करा है वो चीज़ नहीं हो पाती, समथिंग और द अदर चेंजेस. बट when you
How I mean is, when do you consider it complete to, okay, now I'm going to take this out and
that way
and speak to people about this and start getting a sense of
so
what's
what
going
I
on?
do is I have a different method. I write so I have a story. I develop it into a screenplay to a certain level.
Sure.
I like the director to be involved from that point onwards, because the director will definitely have his own perspective. Because this happens that I've written a complete draft, the director comes on board and he says, I think ऐसा change होना चाहिए, I think वैसा change होना चाहिए. So the story is clear in my head. It's on paper. Like I'll have probably a 20 pager with me, which is like a mota screenplay.
Sure.
Then and it has enough for you to see as a director कि यार whether this interests me or not. Then when the director comes on board, then I go back to my writing. I put it on paper. Then it's a proper draft, and then I give it to the director. But I take his perspective also in consideration while putting it.
So your process by itself, like I said, staying with the theme of being organic and bringing folks in, collaborative, it leaves room for people to come in
Absolutely.
and add.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic, man. Let me ask you this, right? When you're in the process of writing again, who's the first person that you pitch your stories to, or tell the story to, or get feedback from?
Well, I have few friends and my wife and my mother. I don't want to go to filmy people.
Right.
Because what happens is they have then sometimes it is कि यार हम creative लोग हैं, हम professional लोग हैं, हम सादी normal advice नहीं दे सकते.
Right.
Whereas what I want is absolutely blatant. हाँ यार ये अच्छा है, ये नहीं है, ये कुछ नया है. So there are these set of people that are there in my life, जिनको मैं सुनाता हूँ. Like I said, my wife, my mother, and few friends, and yeah, I get to know, and they are proper. मतलब Friday को movie देखने वाले लोग.
Right. The audience.
The audience. So they are my bouncing boards, and then of course I have my assistants and all that, and then we put it together. But those are the first people I go to.
Love it. I really like what you said. ये अच्छा है, ये नहीं है, और ये कुछ नया है. ये बहुत मतलब codified feedback है writer के लिए.
Yeah.
The way I see it, right? Otherwise, ये device यहाँ पे Chekhov's gun और ये मतलब red herring, ये सारी चीजें ज़्यादा nuance लोग दे देते हैं. Very interesting. As we wind up, I want you to give me the story of how you started writing. And what was your first brush with this? And what was the first brush of not picking up a pencil or a pen and writing, but the first brush of realizing, hey man, I'm good at this. And so good that I'm going to take this up as a career. When did that sort of moment happen for you?
So the thing is that I've always been in love with stories.
Right.
As a child, I would stay with my grandmother. वो जो दादी नानी की कहानियाँ होती हैं वो मैं बहुत सुनता था. Then as you're growing up, we had those action figures, GI Joes कहते थे उनको.
Of course.
And all my friends used to say, यार आकाश के साथ खेलना है. Now, I didn't realize it then. Now I realize because I used to make stories.
Right.
कि my character will come from here, your character will come from here. फिर जब वो खत्म हो जाते थे तो यार तेरा हीमैन लिया. तो मल्टीवर्स एवेंजर्स में बाद में आया है. हमारे सिंघम और सिम्बा एक दूसरे की बाद में हेल्प कर रहे थे. मैंने एज अ चाइल्ड इस वर्ल्ड के कैरेक्टर को इस वर्ल्ड के कैरेक्टर से मिला दिया था कि अगर यहाँ जी आई जोस प्रॉब्लम है तो हीमैन अपनी दुनिया से आके इनकी हेल्प करेगा एंड ऑल दैट. And yeah, I was always, but you don't realize it at that point of time. But I always had this love for stories, and I was into theater. I did a lot of theater in Delhi. I used to act, I used to direct, I used to write, but always I enjoyed being behind the curtain, not the camera at that point of time.
Right.
I enjoyed the direction and the writing because you're creating something. Nothing gives me more rush because that's a world that I have created. ये मेरी दुनिया के कैरेक्टर्स हैं. ये कहीं और है ही नहीं. ये मेरे दिमाग से निकले हैं. So that gave me a lot of rush. And yeah, and then I started putting stories together. I remember I was quite young when I wrote a story of how a prostitute falls in love with a news reporter and something like that. And my parents were little, कि oh my god, ये इतना डार्क कैसे सोच रहा है, because उसमें कुछ ऐसी लाइंस थी, because एक prostitute का लिंगो कैसा होगा.
बिल्कुल.
So उसमें कुछ cuss words थे and all that. But so gradually, it's not that I ever thought कि मुझे writer बनना है. I think God was always pointing it to me कि ये तुम्हारी राह है, ये तुम्हारी राह है. I was not seeing it for a very long time. But eventually I did, and yeah, here I am.
That's lovely. Along that journey, can you point to a few moments or a few decisions that you took that really stood you in great stead? And I want to give a little bit of context here. Because I have a bunch of friends who are writers. It is a struggle,
Absolutely.
right? And it's not just an outward struggle; it's also an inward struggle, right? I'm not just talking about inspiration नहीं आ रही, writer's block. It's like, यार आज मन ही नहीं है, लिखना ही नहीं है.
छोड़ दो. मैं
आराम
छोड़ देता
करनी
हूँ. मैं छोड़ देता हूँ उस टाइम.
है ना?
आई टेक अ ब्रेक.
Right.
नो मैटर मेरे को किसी का डेडलाइन है, कुछ है, अगर नहीं आ रहा, डोंट पुश इट.
Right.
You can't do that. And I always say that the best writer in the world is the guy up top, Bhagwan. So जैसे मैंने कहा ना कि I'm writing always. So आप just have good observation skills. Half the stories are around you.
Right.
I remember there was this time I was supposed to write a scene, and एक speech थी एक character की, and I just could not crack it. And few friends of mine, they came home and said, let's go out. We went out drinking. And as we were drinking, and one of my friends, he just started laughing and pointed out that, have you ever seen how sleazy the name of the drinks are? Sex on the Beach, Virgin Lady, this and that. And yeah, we laughed about it. Next morning, I was supposed to meet the director. I was supposed to tell him कि sir, मैं नहीं सोच पाया. And as I'm taking a shower, and I realized that conversation comes back to me. I said, yeah, that's quite interesting. Sleazy ये है वो है. And that's when I made a change where this guy is supposed to give a speech, लेकिन उसके सामने और उसको sexual speech देनी है, और उसके सामने जो उसकी स्क्रिप्ट है वो गायब हो जाती है और गलती से कोई बार मेन्यू रख देता है.
Right.
Now he is making a speech out of those drinks, the names of the drinks.
Wow.
कि एक sex on the beach, virgin lady क्या करेगी, ये क्या होगा, वो क्या होगा, and it came out really well. Had I stayed home and pushed myself, I would have never been able to do that.
Right.
So sometimes it's important you take those breaks, go out, meet people, meet interesting people, and those scenes come to you.
Love it. My question was some decisions in your life.
Yeah.
That put you on this path and kept you there. Can
Okay,
you
yeah,
point to a few?
sorry, it's probably I digressed.
No, please.
So one very important decision that I took, I had studied direction.
Right.
And I wanted to be a director. I still want to be a director. But how do you, so if you say you're a singer, I say, okay, गाना सुनाइए. I'll judge, you're a good singer. If you say you're an actor, आप acting करके दिखाएंगे. You're a dancer, dance करके दिखाएंगे. How do you show you're a good director?
Right.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
You don't have the means to make a film. अब तो फिर भी OTT आ गया है, short films आ गई हैं, तब तो वो भी नहीं था.
Right.
So the biggest and the most important decision that I took, and it worked for me, was that I turned to writing.
Right.
Because you can show that you're a good writer by putting something on paper.
Right.
So that was, I think, that one decision really changed my life. After studying direction, a lot of people said, "अरे तुम तो director बनने पढ़ के आए हो, तुम writer क्यों बन गए?" But I think that was one of the wisest decisions that I took. And yeah, I mean, it took a lot of time, but I think it is one of the most. So director बनना है, आप एक राइटर बन के भी बन सकते हैं, आप एडिटर बन के भी बन सकते हैं, आप एक एडी बन के भी बन सकते हैं. बट आई पर्सनली फील राइटर का सबसे ज़्यादा क्रिएटिव रास्ता है टुवर्ड्स डायरेक्शन.
Right.
Because on your journey you are making these stories, your interaction is with the actors, आप वो कहानियाँ बनाते जा रहे हैं अपने रास्ते में. तो आई थिंक दैट वाज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट डिसीजंस दैट आई टुक. And one thing I feel I have done recently, and I think I want to give this advice to all the young writers out there: read. We've stopped reading, especially with so much stuff on OTT and all that. I used to read a lot, then I let go of that. I have started reading again, and probably this has been 6-7 months since I've started, and I can already see a difference. So I think it's a very new decision that I've taken, but I think it will reflect more in the my coming work. So yeah, I think these two decisions are.
Love it. I think I love the fact that you talked about reading, because to me, reading is like touching the insides of someone else's mind, right?
True.
Really exploring the world that they have built very intimately. You can't skim and read,
Correct.
right? If you're skimming and reading, you're reading an encyclopedia. Which is fine,
True.
right? But to really read is to stimulate so much inside your
Absolutely.
mind, right? Like, it takes you to rooms you haven't been in. It takes you to characters you've never met. It shows you colors you've never thought of, right? And that's, I think, a very powerful, very underrated act of imagination, which is reading, right? And I love that.
You can't fiddle with your phone and be on Insta while reading a book. You can do that while watching something on Netflix.
Absolutely.
So because it needs your absolute attention.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, I'm sure people have those habits where they open a book and they've got Instagram open because they want to just Instagram, oh, I'm reading, and then the book has gone to a side.
Correct.
Don't
correct.
do that. Read the damn book, right? Fabulous conversation, Aakash. Thank you so much for joining.
thank you,
Before I
thank
let
you.
you go, I want to ask you for 2 more tips for aspiring writers.
Be brave, be edgy. In my time, there was not OTT. If guys who come now, this is a very good time to be a writer. Have conviction, believe in your story, because the best thing OTT has done is that वो star system को उन्होंने collapse कर दिया.
Yeah.
Earlier it was during my struggling days, like you said, कि आपको बहुत सारे creative compromises करने पड़ते हैं कि इस actor को पसंद आएगा कि नहीं, इसको आएगा कि नहीं आएगा. OTT, there are lot of shows which don't have any actors. They are fresh
Right.
faces.
Right.
Yet if they're made nicely, they are like Jaideep Alawat wasn't Jaideep Alawat when Patal Lok came.
Yeah.
So ऐसे बहुत सारे show, Mirzapur for that matter.
Of course.
Narcos, Sacred Games still had Saif, but Mirzapur didn't have Pankaj Tripathi wasn't Pankaj Tripathi when Mirzapur came.
Right.
So similarly, जब actors को वो मिल रहा है तो writers को भी मिल रहा है. You can write. This is the time to be brave, be edgy. There is loads and loads of ideas out there. This is the time for writers. Come forward, take the baton in your hand, and believe in yourself. And of course, I'll repeat, at the cost of being repetitive, read.
Love it. Let me ask you this. Not a controversial question. I think it's a fact that a lot of writers and a lot of creators are living with today. But there is a sort of sentiment of being a little straitjacketed with being edgy, right? Specifically, political material is being shelved or put away, right? Is that something that has come up in your experience? And if it has, how should people deal with it?
Well, it hasn't come. I have never faced it myself. It is there, definitely. There is no shying away from that. But then there are, like we were discussing before we started about Kashmir Files. I feel Kashmir Files was a very important film to be made.
Sure.
I don't see it as a propaganda film.
Sure.
So I think there are pros and cons to it.
Sure.
You need to learn to live with it. There are a few changes that will happen with time. स्पेशली हिंदी फिल्म्स को तो आजकल बहुत फ्लैक मिलता है. Forget it's not only about political thing. I can tell you something about Thank God.
Sure.
If I can be candid. So we got a lot of flack कि आप चित्रगुप्त को ऐसा कुछ दिखा रहे हैं. And they said कि डाउन साउथ देखिए वो हिंदुत्व को कितना ज़्यादा सपोर्ट करते हैं. And I can show you films which are just from 2018, 2019, South Indian films, where Chitragupt ji is flirting with Apsaras and acting, in a very animated comic way. And Yamraj comes and he scolds him, and they're acting in a very Charlie Chaplinish way. But people don't comment there because it's from down south.
Right.
So these are times that we are living in, but at the same time, I'll say it's a better time.
Sure.
Because at least there are so many avenues.
Right.
और कुछ नहीं, आप YouTube पे डाल दो यार, मत कमाओ उतना, YouTube पे डाल दो. So with time things will change for the better and for the worse, but still for writers this is the best time, I feel.
I agree. I think definitely with the number of platforms, number of avenues, it is a great time to be creative and a writer. I think what's also important is that writing by itself is a revolutionary act, right? You're putting something, like you said, ये सिर्फ मेरे दिमाग में था. Now I made it real by putting it on a piece of paper.
Correct.
Right? Sometimes these constraints are challenges, pushing you to be a little bit more creative, little bit more subversive, little bit more out there, right? Depending on what circumstances you're in. So it's a very interesting take. To round this off, I think this is something that I've stopped doing on this podcast, but I should bring this back, and I'll bring this back with you. Can you recommend 3 films that aspiring writers should watch, according to you?
Oh wow, 3 films. Well, there would be so many. But
This is the constraint time.
But I'll just say one film actually, because it won't be fair if I name 3 and I don't name a lot of them. But then there is one film that stands out for me, and if I ever write a film like that, I would feel कि मेरा काम हो गया. मैं जो करने आया था मैंने achieve कर लिया. जीवन में बहुत है. I'll be content after that. That's Life is Beautiful by Robert Benigni. I think somebody who can write such a funny, happy film in Holocaust, during the Holocaust in a concentration camp. I mean, I have, I think, seen that film around 30 times, and I've cried each time.
Right.
And just the brilliance of writing over there. See, that's also, now isn't that edgy?
Absolutely.
You tell somebody I'm writing a comedy on a concentration camp during the Holocaust.
Absolutely.
Imagine how edgy that is.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's just that one film, because that is absolutely on the top of my list. 3 करूँगा तो फिर 30 बोलनी पड़ेंगे क्योंकि बहुत फिल्में पसंद हैं मुझे. But yeah.
I love it. I mean, like I said, love talking to writers because they've thought about things. Right? They've always thought about things. One of my favorite writers, now late David Foster Wallace, talks about one of the primary obsessions of writers is to think about how they appear to the world. And I think you've given us a very, very nice glimpse of that today, Aakash. I'd love for you to think about what a world where writers get their due looks
Yes.
like. Because
Hopefully we'll see that world one day together, brother.
For sure.
मुझे बताने की जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ेगी, हम देखेंगे साथ में.
क्या बात है. On that happy note, we will bring this episode to a close. Aakash Kaushik, thank you so much
Pleasure.
for being on Storytellers and
Pleasure.
Storysellers.
Pleasure.
That's it on this episode